Matt, how much time do you spend qualifying buyers?
Kevin, we spend quite a lot of time going and digging deep with really what the needs are of the buyer. I think so much time's wasted with taking people to inspections that haven't got their finance arranged, not even really sure what they want to buy. So we do spend a lot of time with these buyers. I've got a couple of buyer managers within my team that go and deal with those buyers directly. So they'll follow up from the open home, find out what they're looking for, whether they've got their finance approved. We've got in-house finance brokers, which we can send the details across to. They'll come back to us and say, yeah, look, they're ready to purchase. And just simply asking the question, are you ready to buy?
So how many questions would you go through to get that qualifying process right?
First and foremost, we ask, did you like the property? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? And then we just ask the question, okay, well, and I think this is the most relative question, which a lot of agents don't ask, is, okay, well, do you want to buy it?
What sort of dialogue do you use to get people to commit to that buying process, Matt?
So I think what buyers really want to know is, one, that the owners are committed to sell it, and two, that it's going to represent good value. So what we do, we spend a lot of time with buyers educating. So at all of my open for inspections, I'll hand out a recent list of comparable sales. We send the buyers through. Even recently, when stock's been quite tight and we've wanted to process our stock a little quicker, I take buyers, or the hot buyers in our car, drive them around, show them the sales, show them the difference between the properties, and try and justify the value of the property. So once they're there and they've made a decision on that's the property that they want, it's just trying to represent that property is good value.
How do you do that?
Well,
because a lot of your properties are auction properties.
A lot of them are auction.
Yeah, so how do you demonstrate that when you can't talk price?
Recent sales. We sort of throw in 5 or 6 or 7 maybe recent sales, a couple that are higher, a couple that are lower, and then just sell the motivation that the seller is really committed to sell it, that they're moving on to something else, or tell the story of what they want. But with all the properties that we have at the moment, there is a genuine story behind these people. We don't take on unrealistic sellers. So a lot of the people that go to auction and spend big money on marketing in our marketplace are committed sellers. So we just keep telling that story, and I think it's easy for the buyers to commit then.
So when you get a buyer to auction, they've got an understanding about the value in their mind that you may have helped them, guide them to that. Sure. You get to the point where you maybe need another $10,000 out of them on the floor. What's the dialogue you use there?
Well, there's one thing. Say, for example, if we have a reserve of, say, $1 million, and we've got the buyer at 990 and no one else is bidding, what I'll do is I'll go and talk to the buyer, to the highest bidder, and say, look, you're the highest bidder at the moment. Unfortunately, it's not enough to get the property on the market. Can I ask you a question? Would you pay 1.2?
So you go over the reserve?
Go well over. So it's far easier to ask for more and to get a little increase than to ask for what you want and then not increase at all. So we generally go over and then step them down. So we say 1.2, they generally say go away. We go, okay, well, surely to God you'd see value at 115. They say no, and it's like, well, how close to that can you get? And sometimes they might say, okay, well, we'll give you 1.1 if you go away, or we'll give you $1 million, and then that sort of bridges that gap.
Got the deal.
Yeah.
So at what point do you go back to the seller and get them to try and bring the reserve down?
Well, usually we try and smash the seller's expectation first. We try and negotiate the price above their reserve and then go back to them. We'll never disclose a reserve to a buyer, or unless it's on the market. And we usually try and, whatever the seller wants, it's not our job to get them what they want. It's our job to get them as much as we possibly can in the market and smash their expectations. So we generally, even if we're going in an auction forum, we're over the reserve, well, we'll disclose it's on the market when it's in the best interest for the seller.
Matt, when we have a buyer's market, how do you get the buyer to commit? Because they're convinced that they're the ones who've got the power.
Yeah, sure. Well, at the moment, thankfully, we're in a bit of a seller's market in our marketplace and there's not much stock. But in a buyer's market, realistically, to differentiate yourself and your product and your property that you're selling to the rest of the market is you've just got to show that it represents great value. One other thing we sort of try and tap into is that it's the right lifestyle for them, that it's going to sit well for what they want, and you just have to do that through the qualification process. I think at the end of the day, if there's 50 properties on the market and only 5 or 6 buyers in there, realistically it's going to be the value that it comes down to. Yeah. So it's promoting that it represents really good value, and I think persistence. I think the deal dies when the agent gives up, and if but agents in those sorts of marketplaces are so destined on showing a buyer one property, and then as soon as they say, oh, I didn't like that house because of that reason, they'll just take that buyer to the next property, and they'll just give them too many choices. Our job as agents is to sell that property and exhaust every single opportunity we can in relation to whatever the objections are with the property and to overcome them. So I think overcoming every objection that they have and presenting that it represents good value, I think that's the only way.
Hello and welcome to this week's show. Some really good results right around Australia, in fact, as you're going to hear from Kevin Brogan in just a moment. Yep, we cracked over 60% again, and Sydney and Melbourne, why do we tell you the figures there? Kevin Brogan back in just a moment.
Did you know you can save up to 70% on your staff costs by outsourcing the low-value, repeatable tasks so your team can focus on growing your business? Beepo is an outsourcing provider focused on the real estate industry. With an English-speaking, tertiary qualified and fully trained team in the Philippines, Beepo will give your business the boost it needs to start growing and returning value to you. For more information, visit beepo.com.au.
Kevin Brogan from CoreLogic with me. G'day, Kevin. How are you going?
Very good, thanks, Kevin, and you?
Yeah, fantastic, my friend. Third week in a row now we've seen preliminaries over 60%, but Sydney and Melbourne over 70%. We'll bring up those preliminary figures. Aren't they spectacular?
Oh, look, they are very strong, 72% in Sydney and just over 70% also in Melbourne. Looking at Melbourne as the week goes on and we get those results in, we've seen relatively small adjustments downwards when we get the final results in. So I think Melbourne, despite the lower headline, is probably going to be the standout by the end of the week.
Yeah, and Brisbane fairly consistent in the 30s, Perth 33.44, but look at Adelaide, mate.
Oh, look, I always keep an eye out for Adelaide. I mean, it's been a steady performing market through some sort of tough times with the market softening on a national basis. As you can see, I mean, the winter affecting the number of auctions, but I mean, it's still a fairly steady performance in the Adelaide market.
Well, let's have a look at Sydney, the sub-regions there. There's some big variations in there, Kevin. Quite a number in the 80s, I've got to say.
Absolutely. No, look, it's certainly been a week where we've seen some strong performances, and I would suggest the two biggest sub-regions in terms of their clearance rate are surprise sub-regions. Balcombe Hills and Hawkesbury, not known for really high clearance rates, and Sutherland, in fact, was the lowest clearance that we recorded last week at 44%, and this week they're sitting around 83%. So really strong performances. Low volumes though; they're not the traditional big auction markets.
Even the high volume ones, you look at North Sydney and Hornsby at 70%, that's still a very respectable figure, very much in line with the overall percentage for Sydney.
Oh, look, it certainly is. I mean, a significant number of the regions, when you aggregate them, had results over 70% this week. Ryde is always a fairly strong performer and has again shown that this week. Also, the eastern suburbs, not too bad either.
Okay, top Sydney sale, harbourfront apartment with marina berth and views. Renee Cross and Ian Campbell from Ray White selling this one at Unit 8, 12 Billiard Avenue, Elizabeth Bay, 3,815,000. 2-bed, 2-bathroom, 2-car. Nice presentation. This one, we'll bring some slides up to show you. What's the story with Elizabeth Bay, Kevin?
Well, look, I think for perspective, it's worth noting this sold in 2000 for 1.25 million. So you can see there's been significant growth over that fairly extended time period. The median unit price in this area is coincidentally around 1.25 million. So you can see even in a highly desirable area, this one is something special. And clearly it's the marina berths and the views that are really a cut above.
Absolutely. Well, we'll take you to Melbourne now to tell you the sub-regions there before we tell you about the grand, majestic home that made the top sale in Melbourne.
These figures, yeah, a bit of variation, a bit of swing in here too. Look at the west at 63 all the way through to the 80s out of inner east.
Yeah, look, I think in Melbourne this week it was the east that shone. Both inner east and outer east are the markets which scored over 80%. In fact, they tied at 80.8%. Not the busiest regions, but nonetheless, I mean, between them over 100 sales. So that's a really strong performance. Most of the areas performing quite well. None of them really dropping below 60%. So quite strong across the board.
And top sale out of Melbourne coming out of Glen Waverley. I'll get you to tell me a little bit about Glen Waverley in a moment. A grand majestic home, this one, 5 bedrooms, 4 bathroom, 3 car on 729 square metres. Kathleen Kwang and Ryan Yan from Barry Plant selling it for $2,308,000, 48 Oxlade Street at Glen Waverley. What can you tell me about Glen Waverley?
So the vendor purchased this property in 2011, so about 8 years ago, for roughly $2 million. So obviously we've seen a little bit of growth there. I think in Glen Waverley, I mean, it's a highly regarded suburb out to the east. The median price at the moment is about $1.25 million, which is down 9% on the year, but we are actually seeing a bit of a rebound in the higher value properties in Melbourne.
We'll have a look at the top sale in Brisbane, Canberra and Adelaide. Firstly, we'll take you to Brisbane. I do actually, at the end of the show too, want to bring up the worm, which we haven't featured in the last couple of weeks, but it's sort of, I tell you what, the old worm, she's moving and in the right direction too, I got to say. But Kevin, top sale out of Brisbane, was a home that hadn't been sold for quite some time, has only ever seen 2 owners in its 100-year history, and that's in a beautiful area in Barden on Simpsons Road, 1.3 million. Stephen Tozer selling this one from Ray White.
Yeah, look, this property, as you say, I mean, this is the first sale for 64 years. Now, the home is presented, it's got a lot of original features, and it has been maintained meticulously. But this property, it's over 1,000 square metres, so there is potential to extend. There's potential for a battle axe block at the back, and like you said, I mean, the location is sensational. It's in a well-established street, beautiful streetscape, and there's plenty that you can do with this one, including retaining the existing dwelling, which is original but really well maintained. Yeah,
very well maintained. And Barden, of course, a lovely family suburb in Brisbane, very close to the city, close to most things, actually. Yeah.
Is, and I think one thing about this this property, I mean, is the location. I mean, all through the softening markets that we've been talking about in a national context, this location has just continued to grow, just modestly, but nonetheless, it's proven its popularity over time.
Top Canberra sale, beautiful oak-lined charmer, 72 Monaro Crescented Red Hill, sold for $1 million. Luton Properties, Samantha Grantner and Greg Hedger selling this one. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms on 868 square metres. I've got to say I hadn't heard of Red Hill before. Of course, there's a Red Hill in a number of cities, but I've never heard it associated with Canberra.
No, well, look, this property is about 3 kilometres due south of Parliament House, so it's really
very close.
Sort of in pole position, so to speak. An intriguing characteristic of this property is it was actually purchased almost 3 years ago to the day for $1,000 more than yesterday's sale price.
Okay. Right.
The median price here is about $1.4 million. This is a property, it is presented really well. It's on a good size block, but I suppose it's relatively modest for the size of block. So I think that's why it's probably come in a little below the median price.
Yeah, it could do with a bit of upgrade, no doubt, and that's probably what the new owners are looking at doing. Adelaide, this is a wonderful villa, 1910 stone-fronted villa, $923,000 in Mile End at 65 Gladstone Road. Bailey Real Estate, Jackie Bailey and Brooke Smith selling this 3-bedder. I love the front of this. Doesn't it picture well?
Oh, look, it certainly does. And for anyone who watched last week's, you would have seen a 1910 Edwardian style property, very similar in character, although this one, I have to say, lacks the turret that we
Yes.
saw last week. But very similar age, all of the period features maintained beautifully with the LED light windows. And all this within sort of 3 kilometres of the centre of the Adelaide CBD.
Well, let's finish the show off this week with a quick look at the worm. And I've got to say, pretty encouraging, isn't it?
I have to say I'm not familiar with the terminology that you're using there. Maybe you haven't done this since I came on. But if it's relating to the clearance rates,
well, it's the graph. I call it the worm because it looks a bit like a worm goes up and down and all around.
Yeah.
But,
So look, I mean, the clearance rates certainly are on the way up, both in Sydney and Melbourne in particular, but on a national basis. And I think one of the things that we're going to be watching really closely, tomorrow we're publishing our hedonic index for house prices. And historically, the clearance rates have actually correlated very closely with changes in house price. So we're coming off the back of an extended softening period. I think that at a headline level, house prices are down 0.2% across the country. But it'd be really interesting to see when we get the breakdown tomorrow, whether markets are actually showing a modest increase after the federal election.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. I think this is, I call it the worm. I don't know what you call it, what, a moving graph or something, do you?
Yes, we probably refer to it as just a sort of time series of clearance rates. I have to say, working for a data and analytics company, I don't have a nickname for all of the graphs that we produce.
Well, can we christen this one the worm?
I'm more than happy with that. I know what you mean now.
But it does tell a great story. If you look at it, because it goes way back to 2009, so it does tell a great story over the last decade. And you can see those clearance rates, clearly there have been, there was a dip, has been another dip, and it didn't seem to go on for quite as long as the one back in 2010, 11 and 12, Kevin.
No, that's right. I mean, this market softening, when you look at it across the country, in most capital cities, it did seem to be really quite aggressive, quite a steep decline. But even before the start of the campaign for the federal election, we did see clearance rates in the first quarter of this year stabilise, and indeed house prices start to decline at a slower rate. So I think the signs are there for indicating that we may have reached the bottom of the current cycle. It'd be really interesting to see how any future interest rate cuts and affordability constraints sort of impact on demand moving into the next quarter of the year. Yeah.
Interesting to hear you. Are you calling it yet or not? Are you calling the bottom of the market?
I think we need to see and study the data. I mean, one thing that I think it will show is that the prices are stabilising. But of course, there's so much regional variation. I mean, I'm speaking to you from Adelaide, where in fact the market actually stayed in positive territory when falls in Sydney and Melbourne were in double-digit territory. If we actually see Sydney and Melbourne starting to stabilise now, well, what's going to happen in Adelaide or perhaps in Perth, where the market started to fall, some 4 years ago? Because it's not going to be a uniform impact across all capital cities or indeed all regions.
Wonderful talking to you, my friend. Thank you very much for your time. And we'll catch you on Friday when we have a look at the week ahead. But Kevin Brogan joins us every Monday and every Friday from CoreLogic. Kevin, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Speak to you soon.